What's up everyone, welcome to another video. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back. I hope you've been able to learn a lot of stuff so far from my previous videos. And if you're new here, what's up? My name's Pete Summers. I'm a DJ music producer from Boston, Massachusetts. I've had the opportunity to open up for some amazing artists like Diplo, Tiesto, Stevie Aoki, Loud Luxury, and so many more. And I've had some original music posted on major record labels. So a goal that I set for myself in 2025 is to really start creating a little more content and opening up the lens a little bit more on my music production process to hopefully teach and inspire some of you to get a little more involved in the music industry and really take your first steps into producing your first song. So today I'd like to talk to you all about the 5 most important audio effects that you most likely will be using on every single track that you will be working on as a music producer. So without further ado, let's dive into Ableton and see what we have. The first effect we're going to be talking about today is called an EQ, and we're going to find that right here in Ableton under EQ8. So we'll click and drag that into our audio track right here, which I do have as demonstration purposes, just a piano going up in pitch, like so. And before I do anything with the EQ, to explain it a little bit, this is showing you a table or a graph of a frequency range from 0 to 22,000 hertz, and then a range in volume from plus 12 decibels to minus 12 decibels. Without getting too complicated, all sound and music in our world is made up of frequencies on this range. So what you're going to get a lot down here in your lower frequencies are going to be, in music terms, your bass notes, bass guitar, your kick drum, anything that has a lot of heavy body. It's the type of music that you can feel and not just hear. Anything in this range right here will be most of your instruments. So your voice is going to be here, your vocals will be in this range, your piano, your guitar, many instruments will be in this mid-range here, and then your high end right here will be also some of these instruments here just played at higher pitches, as well as for drums, your hi-hats, cymbals, and white noise as well. So what you can do with an EQ is you can manipulate these frequencies volumes essentially, and you can do that by moving around these nodes that they have for you here. So this 2 I can bring up and down anywhere and change the shape of this EQ curve. Let's say my bass is too loud, I can drag the 2 over to this low end right here and I can drag it down. If my mid-range is too quiet, I can take my 2 here and I can raise it up. If my high end's too loud, I can take the 2 and lower it down. And you have 8 different nodes on your EQ that you can use to manipulate these frequencies. As you'll see, what automatically happens on the ends here is that it creates this curve that kind of falls off into infinity, and that's just a different shape that you can also create on this EQ as well. So you'll have all these different shapes that you can go by. This will completely cut off a frequency as you bring it up. So as you can see here, we're not getting any of our bass frequencies anymore. We're just cutting off into this mid to high range area. Same if you were to move this 8 down, you're now cutting off your high end, so that will start muffling a lot of sounds, and just keep it in your low end, so your bass. Now another thing you can do with these curves as well, you see these cues here, this is basically showing you the steepness or the strength of these curves as well. So as we move up this 5 here, and then I go to the 5 on this, I turn up this cue, we'll see this get a lot thinner. So it gives you a lot more control to a frequency range, whether you want to raise or cut it down. So let's play our piano notes and mess around with this EQ to really hear what it's doing. So as I raise down this 8 here, start cutting off these high frequencies, we hear it getting muffled a lot. And we're only really getting this low note right here. If I change the steepness of it, say this 4 times one, where it just becomes a lot more drastic here, once again, you're getting cut off even more. You're only hearing these bass notes. All this gets taken away. Now if we do it on the other side, the sound starts sounding a lot more thin. You almost have that kind of radio effect to it. And this you can barely even hear, but you only get that very high end of that piano. If we were to just concise it down to our mid-range here, you get a little hybrid of the both. Typically, this is used throughout a song to create space in your mix for a lot of these frequencies to sit, because as you start piling tracks on top of each other, as you'll see here, this piano encompasses a wide range of frequencies, some of which could be taken up by the bass in your song, some of which could be taken up by your hi-hats or your drums in certain areas. Even if you have a guitar or vocals on in the middle here, some of these frequencies will start building up on top of each other. You use this frequency to really understand what needs to take the priority in that frequency range and make the adjustments, typically by cutting down frequency range in your other tracks in order to make room for it. For example, what a lot of producers will do for most of their tracks other than their kick drum and their sub is they'll cut out these bass frequencies down here, these lower end frequencies, because your sub is covering most of the work when it comes to your lower end frequencies. So you don't really need to pile on unnecessary frequencies from your other instruments in that area. Next up, we're going to talk about reverb, which is right here in Ableton. So we'll drop that into our track as well. So as you hear right there at the end, as I stopped it, it creates a little bit of a tail to our song. So I'll play it again. A reverb does a great job of putting your instruments or your vocals or anything that you're adding to your track into a certain space. If you've ever been in a church or a gymnasium or any large auditorium or room, you'll hear a difference in sound, say for clapping, than you would in your bedroom. And that's because there's more space for the sound to travel throughout the room. So in this case, it's important to add reverb onto your instruments in order to make them sound a little more natural. To really show what this reverb does, let's turn this dry wet knob up to 100%. What this is basically showing is that now our outputted sound is going to be 100% reverb. If we were to mix this halfway, you're going to get the output that is coming in after the reverb as well as the original audio we're getting here. But let's turn it up to 100% for this demonstration and hear what we have. So as we turn this knob up to 100%, our piano starts to sound further and further away. We can change a couple more parameters on here. For example, like this decay. This decay is essentially showing you how long it'll take for this sound to go completely silent after it's done being played. So we can turn this up and really accentuate it as well. And if I were to stop this, then you'll hear it play out for 15 seconds. So as you could hear, you probably want to be pretty careful with this decay knob, because if we have it really long, then the notes start overlapping with one another. It's probably important to keep it in like the 1 to 4 second range, just so you can have a little more control over your sound and it doesn't sound too drowned out. Okay, so the next effect we're going to be talking about today is going to be a delay. Delay is very similar to reverb in the case that it adds an effect onto a sound after it's being played. A lot of you may already be familiar with delays, but let's hear what the default settings have on our piano sound. So just like the reverb, our dry wet knob for the delay, if we turn this all the way up to 100, is only going to give you the output from the delay. So once again, you want to find a nice balance of dry signal and the delay output that you're adding here. So as you can hear, it's continuing to play these notes and it's fading them out over time. In order to extend that time that's being played out is going to be this feedback knob here. So we turn this feedback up. It takes longer for that delay signal to fade out to silence. If we were to have this shorter, it's much shorter for that signal to go silent. By default, it's delaying on triplets, but we can also change this to 1 beat, as you can hear here. So it's a much shorter delay. It's only taking that first section right here for 2 beats. So once again, it's just delaying this first 2 beats right here for 3. And then we have 4 beats. And now this one's interesting because our 4-beat delay is being played at the same time that our next dry note is being played right here. So similar to the reverb, you need to be careful with your parameters here to make sure that your sounds don't start piling on top of each other and don't get very messy sounding. The next effect I want to talk to you guys about today is called a compressor. So let's drag this onto our track right here. So for demonstration purposes, I changed the sound of this piano a little bit, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to record this MIDI into an audio track just so I can visually show you what a compressor is doing. As you see right here, all of these piano hits kind of have this triangular pattern to them. When the note is first being played at a very loud volume and then kind of tails off into a quieter volume as the note plays on, and then after each hit it kind of repeats the same pattern. What a compressor does is it helps normalize this sound a little bit and tame these transients. The first parameter I'm going to show you right here is called a threshold. So what we can do with this threshold is that we can set a ceiling that we don't want our volume to go past. So if we look at our audio file again, and for example, if we were to set our threshold about halfway up here, it's going to take all this signal that's above this threshold over the course of the entire audio file. It's going to squish it down underneath that compression. Just as the name says, it's squeezing the volume closer and closer together, which then levels out the sound. As we set our line here, anything down here isn't being affected by the compressor. It's only the volume that goes over that threshold. Now there's these parameters on the side here that I'll also talk about as well. So what your attack here does is it sets the time that it takes for the compressor to jump into action once it senses a volume that is going past its threshold here. So by default it's at 1 millisecond, but if you wanted the compressor to jump in right away, you can turn this all the way down to 0.01 milliseconds. Similarly, your release is going to be set how long it takes the compressor to stop working once it stops sensing a signal above its threshold. So a lot of producers will use compression as a way to normalize volume, but it's also used in other instances in order to shape transients. And once again, transients being your initial hits on your piano keys or any instrument you have, compression can be used a lot for making instruments sound a little more punchy, even drums, and tighter. So compressors can sometimes be used to make your initial hits louder and then your tails a little quieter, and vice versa. And finally, the last audio effect that I'm going to be showing you today is called a saturator. So what we're doing with a saturator is we're actually purposely raising the volume of that sound into a compressor, which then naturally creates higher harmonics of that sound. I'm actually going to pull up a EQ so we can actually see what this saturator is doing to this piano. So let's play our clip and turn up this drive knob right here. Have to turn down this output as well. Obviously with the saturator, because we're boosting so much in volume, we're going to have to make up for it by turning down the volume after we get those upper harmonics. You have so much more to this sound. It sounds a lot fuzzier and distorted. And that's because the natural harmonics of this piano that we're playing, all these peaks that you see here, are being distorted and replicated at a higher frequency. You end up getting a lot more volume up here and even down here as well. To make this even clearer, I'm going to show you using a sine wave on Serum. As you can see, we have one harmonic on this sine wave right here that goes up in pitch. As we turn up the drive on the saturator, you'll see this EQ wave change a little bit. And we'll turn down the volume just so we can get a volume match for this. So now all of a sudden, you have all these peaks that are also taking place at the higher ranges here. And that's because this frequency is now getting distorted and replicated at higher frequencies. So we'll turn it off and hear the difference. We just have this one basic frequency. The saturator adds on harmonics to that frequency on top by distorting the signal. So just like all the other audio effects, you also have a dry wet knob here. So by default, you have 100% of the signal saturated as your output, but you can also dial this down a little bit to get a nice blend between your original signal as well as your saturated signal. And those are the 5 audio effects I think that are the most important for all music producers and beginner producers and DJs to really understand when it comes to music production. Obviously, I probably went through some of them a little fast, so if you want me to make any more in-depth tutorials on any of them, please let me know in the comments below. As well as if you have any other questions about music production that you want me to cover, please let me know below in the comments. On top of that, if you've been working on anything that you want any feedback on or just another ear. On top of that, if you do have any music that you're working on or have anything that you're struggling with music, please feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at Pete Summers Music. I'd be happy to listen to anything you have. I'd be happy to listen to anything you're working on and provide feedback however I can. And that's all I have for you today. If you enjoyed this and found it useful, please leave me a like below. And also, if you'd like to subscribe to my channel, I live stream every single Tuesday my music production process, as well as some demo feedbacks and anything else. I also have new videos coming out every single week guiding you through the music production process. And once again, that is all for me. I'll see you next time.